When the new Supra was debuting and people were catching on to the fact that it was carrying a lot of similarities that would make you wonder if it was like a stray cat on stray cat sort of action, people pulled back. They weren't as inherently excited about the car. People were starting to say like, there's nothing special about it. That's what I just said. And user 2492592 said it was just going to be another car without a soul. And yes, when it was debuted, it sold twice as many Z4s and has a massive following that even probably more than Toyota even thought. Another story that likely carries the torch would be the BRZ and GR86 combo as well. How could a car that carries so much identical nature that it could actually stay in production for a full decade and people still love the car? Well, it's because people like us, and that's pretty much it. So when there's a car that doesn't carry a lot of similarities with its predecessor, it's still gonna get ridiculed until people get their hands on it, and which is the case that I have with this particular car as well. People end up they end up eating their words a little bit, because if it's too familiar, then they didn't go out of the box. If it's too crazy, they should have stayed core to their roots. I'm Alex, and today we're gonna be talking about just one of those cars, one of the newer sports cars that already has its fair share of criticism, even though it probably shouldn't. We're gonna be talking about you wanting to own a brand new Nissan Z. And if you're looking for aftermarket wheels, tires, or suspension, be sure to hit us up over at fitmentindustries.com. The boys are building a VIP cop car, so you probably won't want to miss out on that, and be sure to subscribe. I'm not sure why a Crown Vic of all cars, but they give me anxiety on Friday night, so let that be that. But when we look at the new Z, there's a lot of familiarity to it when it comes to like either the praise or the criticism to how it looks, all right? It gets praised because of its connectivity to its heritage, or it gets criticized because it didn't go far enough out of the standard box. And I'm gonna be a little bit honest here. You can either have designers like Camaro where they change substantially every 3 years and you can never actually get a grasp for if it's a good looking car or not because it changes so constantly. Or you can have somebody like Porsche where it all just kind of looks the same for 3 decades. Now, I personally prefer the latter because when you stay true to a design that really does look good, I love it. The new Z, albeit similar to its 370Z parental, is insanely closely related to the body lines and styling of the early Zs, which was their point. You can see it in a few different places specifically though. The teardrop headlights are reminiscent of a Datsun Z headlight with the covers on. The front grille looks nearly identical to the grandpa of the Z minus the actual brash bar, and the rear taillights feature that iconic hamburger double top down style taillights. And there's a Z badge on the same exact spot as the Datsun badge on the rear pillar. If you actually had an old Z, you put that there. I just had a Nissan Z plate because somebody stole my 240Z plate. So let that be a lesson to people like me, I guess. I don't know. You can see the new Z like I had the old Z, and they're almost the same car. Give or take a V8 that was supercharged and had over fenders and stuff. But when Nissan decided to come out to the sports car grounds again after milking the 370Z as dry as humanly possible, which I still don't get how Nissan is able to keep the production of the cars for so long, it would come back with a 3-liter twin-turbo 6,800 RPM redline, which was a lower RPM redline than the 370Z, but you got more power curves. You got 400 horsepower and 350 foot-pounds of torque, which meant that you got just enough power out of that tiny engine. Now, peak torque, though, is where you start to see the technology improvements come to life on this car versus its predecessor. I mean, after all, everyone is comparing this car to the 370Z, right? It's just a new body on the 370Z. It's just a 370Z with cool taillights. It's not. Well, one thing to remember here is just by changing the engine and refining it to the platform, Nissan was able to introduce peak torque for the engine at 1,600 RPM and keep it there all the way through 5,200 RPM. And that has to do with their twin turbo, tiny little boy setup. Unlike the 370Z, which needed to get to 5,200 RPM to reach its peak torque. Now, since it comes to the engine that's known in the Q50, that also means for people like you and people like me that engine modifications are gonna hit this car insanely early. It also means that the issues related to modifications on the Q50 will likely be an issue on this platform as well. So you're just gonna have to red flag that muff. But what this does mean is that you can likely tap into some quick tuning software and increase horsepower and torque in about 30 minutes so that the power is there as long as the rest of the car can typically handle it. And that's one of the cool things about this new twin turbo platform is there's a lot of opportunity. And that's what past critics have also been afraid of, is just how much power can it actually handle. Now, it does come down to if people think that it's just like a cleverly redesigned, updated / makeup on a pig that was the 370Z, and I really don't think that's the case here. But sure, the new Z does have similarities to the 370. People have called it to like the doors being nearly identical, and you'll probably find plenty of reused plastic components inside that may have been snuck into like your Infiniti SUV. And albeit that's not fact yet. What I can share is that outside of the platform and chassis, the 2023 Z has about 80% of its total components either revised or new for this car. Why that's a big deal is because it shows us that you're gonna get a different driving experience, and that's what a lot of people have to say after getting their hands behind the wheel. You're getting revised strut tower braces, extra firewall braces, new front pieces, lower friction monotube shocks, and a dual mass flywheel in the Z that has a new vibration absorber that actually sends the energy back to the drivetrain instead of venting it as heat. And the reason that that little fun fact is so interesting is because that's something Nissan hasn't done reportedly since the R34. The car's not out yet, but you're still thinking of maybe picking up maybe a proto spec. Maybe you're driving across a dealership and for some ungodly known reason, new cars are available again, and there's a Z sitting at your local Nissan dealership. I've dreamt of that moment too. So you want a Nissan Z. Well, set down your VQ jokes and grab your favorite hair dye, because we're gonna talk about what it's like to potentially own one of these bad boys. Because I'm just excited that finally there's something coming out that's new with a manual that's not a Miata. Okay, the new Nissan Z is a fresh take on the Z platform, and the Z platform has undoubtedly been incredibly successful when you see who's actually making the car. The 350Z has become a staple for grassroots drifting, entry-level enthusiast building, and a car that can do just about anything. And to be honest, the Z for me looks a bit like and feels like a little bit of the 240SX story. You get less balance overall on the Z platform, but you can do a lot with a newer platform, newer body, and typically it's a little bit less rusty, and it'll just last longer. The 370Z was that same thing. Now, even though it carries a price tag that's a little bit too steep to do like dumb stuff in, it's still a solid car for our money and looks dang good. The 350Z entry, the 370Z premier. So the Z, in our eyes, parting any catastrophic recall, will be a good car. It looks sharp, comes with excellent weight distribution, and comes with a stick in the middle, which so many enthusiasts were pleading for but not getting from other manufacturers like Toyota until it was already too late. The twin turbo featuring a recirculation valve, forged wheels as an option, some electronically assisted power assisted steering, clutch type mechanical LSD over the viscous LSD. There's a bunch of different options there that you can choose from. You'll be able to choose between sport, performance, and the proto spec as different trim options. As an enthusiast, you have to ask yourself if the updated trims are worth it if you're planning on modifying these cars. There's been people on TikTok saying that it's not worth it, but in my opinion, the answer is yes, if you can. The performance package gets you some sport mufflers, sport tuned suspension, LSD, sport brakes, which is probably the most important part of this, to be honest, because brakes are the things that toast the fastest. You get larger wheels and tires, you get some rev matching stuff in the manual, you get some other power bits, touch screen, better stereo, and home link, along with some other goodies. And it's about 10K more, but with it coming with a warranty and assuming you're gonna drive the crap out of this car, I do think it's worth the upsell to get those extra bits and pieces. I'd recommend staying away from the automatic on this car specifically. I think that they're not good and I wouldn't touch them. But it's too familiar with the Nissan family, and I don't think it's enough to say that it's actually a sporty feel yet. Do what you want with that, but is it worth it to build and modify? I mean, it's gonna be a $45,000 purchase once you're pretty much all said and done. I wouldn't be hard pressed to say that these will be 55 grand when they launch, and that's a hefty price tag when you compare it to like other used cars, and maybe even some that are slightly above it. It can be a little dangerous, and I think what the Z hits if you're looking for a new car is the ideology of a new generation sports car that still carries a lot of heritage to the past. It's a little bit more retro than I think what you would see in like the Toyota Supra. Now sure, it's gonna be expensive. Sure, will it be as expensive as a Supra? Maybe, and I think the Z will be a hit though if you're looking for a car that's affordably priced for a new sports car, comes with a good chunk of power, and has enough love by the community that modifications will be ready on day one of launch, and I think that that's what matters. I think what may feel a little uncomfy though will be the similarities as they begin to shine through compared to the 370Z, which did plague it a bit in terms of sales over time. I'm about it and can't wait to see what people do to it. Now, people like Chris Forsberg have already shown us its extremes, what the car is capable of and how it could look, and I think the community news shows us the extreme of what the car is capable of and what it could look like, and what I think the community needs is just a new, unique platform like the Supra, like just what they did a few years ago, except this one comes in a manual, it's about 10 grand less. But what do you think? Do you think it'll be like the Supra and be a success, or do you think it's gonna be a flop? Let us know below, and if you're looking for aftermarket wheels, tires, or suspension, be sure to hit us up over at fitmentindustries.com. I'm Alex from Fitment Industries, and we will see you later. Peace.